may have never been printed. I should really write them down. They were told to me by my teacher, who experienced them firsthand. He was alive during World War I. He lived till he was almost 100 years old. He was 99, and a few months before his 100th birthday, he passed away. So I knew him when I was a young girl, and he was in his late 80s when I knew him, and he told me some firsthand stories from his life experience in Russia, in Siberia, in the Gulag, 20 years in the Gulag. This is his a book that he wrote. He wrote it in Yiddish. It was translated to English. It's called Sabota. It's on Amazon now, available. It was out of print for many years. This actually, the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him to write this book. It was a book that when he wrote it three times more. It was his experience in Siberia as a political prisoner, because he was spreading Yiddishkeit. He was working for the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he was taken by the KGB and tortured and convicted for his crimes against the Russian government. And he was sent to Siberia for 10 years. And then when he was there, he got another 10 years. So while he was there, he kept Shabbos, he kept kosher, he kept his beard and payas, he kept everything that he could. His tefillin was taken away, other things he wasn't able to, whatever he could. For self-sacrifice, he did keep his commitment to Yiddishkeit. And even though according to Torah law, it's not an obligation, you're actually not supposed to put your life at risk in order to keep Torah and mitzvahs. There's only three things that a person's supposed to risk their life for. And that's not to commit adultery, not to murder, and not to worship idols. Those three things, if it's, you're given a choice, are you willing to, if somebody tells you, if you don't kill this person, we'll kill you, you're not supposed to kill that person. You're supposed to be willing to give up your life. But all other mitzvahs, if somebody says, we'll kill you if you don't keep this mitzvah, you're supposed to violate that commandment and save your life. Life is much more important. They say violate Shabbos one time and you will be able to keep it for many times, hopefully later. But in his case, it was an interesting case because he was a student of the Rebbe Rashab, whose Hilula is today, and then he was a student of the previous Rebbe, and then he was a chassid of our present Rebbe after he came out of Siberia and out of Russia many, many years later. But in his case, the reason he felt he had to stay true to his Torah and mitzvahs, even in Siberia, even under threat of death, was because he had received a special blessing from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the blessing was that if he would stay strong and be like Mordechai and not be afraid once he would be taken, most of the Hasidim that were taken knew ahead of time that they were being followed by the KGB, and they knew that they would be arrested for their work on behalf of the underground Chabad movement in Russia at the time. So he knew he was going to be taken. The previous Rebbe told him he will be taken to Siberia, but he said, if you be strong like Mordechai and you will not give in, you will stand firm like Mordechai didn't bow down to Haman. He stood firm as a Jew. He said, then you will be saved and you will come out of the Gulag, you'll come out of the prison, and you will be able not only to come out of the Gulag, he said, you'll make it to Israel, which was like a dream that, was like almost like it's like impossible in those days. So he made it out, and he did let me just see if there's a problem with I see that Dvorah Leah signed out, and I'm wondering if there's a problem with the recording, and she's sending me a text. Hold on one second. Let me just check my messages. Dina Leah. No, it seems like it's okay. Let me okay. There you are. Okay. So if Dina Leah, okay, let me just. Dina Leah, if there's any problem, let me know. Send me a text. I'll check my phone, my WhatsApp. If you don't hear me or something, can you undo yourself and tell me if you hear me? You hear me. Okay, good. Because I saw you logged out for a second. Okay. Okay, wonderful. So I'll show you another book. This is a book in Hebrew written about him. Stories that he told after the stories from before and after his 20 years in Siberia. It's a 2-volume set. There's another book here that was printed for kids with in Hebrew also. And then recently I saw in the Jewish bookstores also, they did cartoon books of, animated cartoon stories of from his 20 years, a few stories, select stories from his 20 years in Siberia. So he felt that if he would be strong and hold on to his Yiddishkeit no matter what, that would be what would save him. He'd show no fear. And he took that stance. Nothing, they can't threaten him or frighten him, intimidate him, because that was the tactic of the Russian government at that time, was to use fear-mongering tactics to get the prisoners to admit that they did wrong, to get the prisoners to succumb to them. And ultimately, it was the fear that he felt if he gave into that fear, he wouldn't be able to handle himself and survive, because of the blessing that he got from the Rebbe, not to be afraid. So for him, not to be afraid meant that he could do whatever he wanted in terms of Torah and mitzvahs, and show them that he's not afraid, that they can't subdue him or make him submissive. And that really got them very upset with him. But somehow, miracles after miracle and everyday miracles, he was able to survive. He was even given an accounting job for many years in Siberia. So he had a little bit better after being there after being in slave labor. He was given a job in an accounting, because he was an accountant. He was actually the accountant of the previous Rebbe's Chabad underground yeshiva system in Siberia, in Russia. Before, once the communists took over, they had to go underground. And so he was in charge of the accounting and paying the teachers and making sure the yeshiva system kept going. He was one of the 10 Hasidim. Rabbi Eliezer Nanos, my teacher, was one of the 10 Hasidim who were asked by the previous Rebbe to swear to him that they would keep the underground Chabad yeshiva system going in Russia even after the previous Rebbe left Russia. When the previous Rebbe was expelled and evicted from Russia after he was imprisoned and sentenced to death, and then it was commuted to life, and the previous Rebbe was basically thrown out of Russia, thank God. And he was able to come to America and establish Chabad in America. But he left behind a bunch of Hasidim. And before he left, when he asked 10 of his Hasidim to swear to him that they would keep the underground movement going, even if it would mean putting their life at risk, even if it would mean going to Siberia. And that's really what happened. So this Rabbi Eliezer Nanos, though, I wanted to tell you a story of him during World War I. Before, when he was a chassid and he was a 17-year-old, and this story he told me personally directly, and he was a student in the Chabad yeshiva of Lubavitch, in the town of Lubavitch in Russia, during World War I, when World War I broke out. In those days, of course, there's no communication. There's no, nothing, really, no communication. I mean, maybe there was telegrams, but not in most places. And during World War I, there were many, many Jews that were, especially from Poland, that were sent from, were refugees. And when they fled from Poland into Russia, then they were sent by the Russians to Siberia, like to this far off place. Most of them died on the way, or died of hunger, or died of disease, or died of things. But many thousands of them made it to Siberia. And then they were there in Siberia with nothing to hold them together, both physically and spiritually. They were like kind of prisoners of war that weren't taken care of. And they were starving, and they were left alone. So the Rebbe Rashab, he's the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, whose Yortzeit Hilula is today. He was the Chabad Rebbe during World War I, and he selected Rabbi Eliezer Nanos, my teacher, to go on a mission into Siberia and help these Jews that were all on their own. And first of all, the Rebbe told them to take Sidurim, prayer books, that were printed specially for them. The Rebbe Shab printed special prayer books for them so that they would have something to pray from. And he instructed him to go get some food from the kitchen that his wife and mother were cooking, because there was going to be no food on the journey of the way. He was instructed to get on a train. He was given a little bit of money, and that's it. No cell phone, no way to call, no 7-Eleven on the way, nothing. No, a 70-year-old boy on his own, instructed to go take a train to Siberia and see what he can do to help the Jews there. So that was his mission, and he told me the story at great length. I wish I was more of a person who could remember details better. I may have written some notes somewhere. I could look it up another time, but it was fascinating because when he got to Siberia, there were actually thousands of Polish Jews there who were very excited to see him and to get Sidurim and stuff. And they wanted his help very, very much and desperately. And his mission was to try to establish a shul, a synagogue for them, and to establish a cheder, a learning system, so the kids could have some learning while he was there, while they were there in Siberia. So how would he do a shul? So this is the miracle that I was pretty amazed. How can you establish a shul in Siberia during World War I through a 17-year-old Bachur who has no communication? Okay, we think nowadays, we send Bachurim to Timbuktu or whatever. At least they have a way to communicate. At least there's internet. At least there's some bank accounts, money they can withdraw. At least there's some resources. There was no resources that I could even imagine. But what was there? There were some Kantonistim. There were some Jews left over who had finished their 25 years in the Russian army. There were Jews that were stolen, basically taken by the Russian government from their homes when they were little kids, and they were taken into the army, the Russian army, to serve for 25 years. It was a well-known thing. Every community had to sacrifice. I mean, they had no choice. The Russian government would come and take a bunch of kids from every town that they reached, and they would take these kids and basically incarcerate them into the Russian army for 25 years of their life. So these pure little kids, many of them were also even forced to convert, but not necessarily. And they were forced, though, to grow up and live as non-Jews. However, these little kids, once they finished the army, they still had a Jewish heart and still had memories. And many of them never went back. They just ended up staying in Siberia and continuing their life there. They had no contact with their homes. So Rabbi Eliezer posts some of these wonderful people. They were called Cantonists, who had had money, they had businesses, they had lives. Many of them were married, established, and they donated the money and the help and the resources and the contacts with the government or with whoever was there in order to help create a school system and a shul system for the Jews who came in from Siberia, from Poland. So that was when Rabbi Eliezer, it took months and months. Once he finished his mission, they also gave him some food to eat, so he didn't starve. But once he finished his mission over there, he went back to yeshiva and reported to the Rebbe of his accomplishments. So that was one amazing story that I don't know if. I'll tell you. A few weeks ago, I met somebody who was telling me that his father had, when he was 15, he fled from Poland with his father and some of his family members. They fled from Poland to Russia during World War II. Okay, so this is a story from just a few weeks ago. This man tells me his father came to Siberia and with a group of Jews during World War II. As they fled, they were immigrants who fled, the Nazis, and they were sent also to Siberia, Jewish Polish immigrants. When they get to Siberia, there's nothing there. There was two men in their group that were sent on a work mission to a very remote village, and the remote village was actually abandoned. And when they got to the village, they were very shocked because they found a shul, they found a synagogue in the middle of Siberia in an abandoned location, abandoned village. So they walk into the shul and they open up the Ark, the Aron Kodesh. Okay, I just heard this story a couple of weeks ago from somebody whose father was there in that group. Two of his friends went to the shul, they open up the Aron Kodesh, they see Sifrei Torah, they see Torah scrolls. So they went back, they got very excited, they went back to the group and they said, we found Torah scrolls and when we were on our work site in an abandoned town, in an abandoned synagogue. And so the group member said, why didn't you take it? Go back and take it. So these two young men actually kind of risked their lives to go back to this abandoned village and take the Sefer Torahs and bring it to these Polish Jews who were more, I guess, more religious and appreciated the Torah scrolls, and they had it there. And I was thinking, they always wondered, how did this synagogue get into this remote village way out there in Siberia with Torah scrolls? They were like shocked. They had no idea. So I told this person about the story about Rabbi Eliezer that he himself told me during World War I when he was 17. The Rebbe Rashab, who's Hilula is today, sent him to Siberia to establish synagogues and to establish schools. And who knows, I don't know if it's the same synagogue or if it was another one, but there was a Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, about 100 years ago during World War I, 1917, I believe, approximately 1917, sent Rabbi Eliezer, my teacher, to Siberia, and he told me this story, and he established a synagogue there. When they got the Sefer Torah there, I don't know, it could have been after he left, but I don't think it was during the war that they got the Sefer Torah there. It was probably after the synagogue had been there for a while, but who knows, but there's little pieces that we can put together. So that is my teacher, Rabbi Eliezer. I'll tell you another story from him, but for those who came late, this is his book in English. You can get this on Amazon, Sabota. I'm not even sure who printed it. He himself wrote it in Yiddish and it was translated into English. It's stories of his 20 years in slave labor camps in Siberia for being a chassid of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe and running underground Chabad yeshiva schools underground, which was illegal during the communist regime. And this is another one in Hebrew, and this is another one in Hebrew, and then there's more comic book ones in Hebrew, in English, that you can get it at I guess at a Chabad bookstore. I'm not sure I don't have it here. I gave it to my kids, so I'm not sure who's the printer, but you can ask for it. And from a good bookstore will have it. It was recently printed. So that was one story. I wrote down a couple. There's some amazing stories. And today we'll basically be doing stories because it's a shame with people. Some of these stories aren't recorded anywhere and they need to get out there. Okay, so, I'll tell you another story that also, I wish I remembered the details because I heard this when I was a young girl, a young teenager. So I don't remember all the details and I'll have to look up because I did take notes at the time and I haven't looked up my notes for a long time. But there is one other story because you think of like these, right now we're also experiencing war around us. And if you go back in history and you see, what wars were taking place during World War I, there were Bachrim, boys, young yeshiva students also who were taken to the army from the Lubavitch yeshiva in Lubavitch, where, under the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab established a yeshiva in the city of Lubavitch. And one of the hardest things that the boys had to face was that they would be taken to the Russian army. And the Russian army, first of all, meant most probably death, because they would send them to the front lines without the proper gear and protection, and they would be killed. That was number one. Number two, there was no way for them to necessarily keep Torah mitzvahs. And they didn't know, if they would be, harmed, hurt, injured, thrown to some other end of the earth. There's no communication, like we said, no way to communicate with the Rebbe, with their family. It was like a death sentence to be taken to the Russian army during World War I. And all the Bachrim had to face being taken. So different Bachrim, different boys, young men, did different things to try to get out of it. But there was one Bachar from the yeshiva that was actually didn't manage to evade the draft, and he was drafted to the Russian army during World War I. And this is a story that's I don't think it's ever been published, and I think Rabbi Eliezer only told this to me because he knew I would believe it. But I don't know how many people would actually necessarily believe this story because it is kind of unbelievable. But I'll tell you in short, because I don't remember all the details, but he told me the stories, with the names, the name of the bacher who was taken, the name of the person who helped them. But basically, I'll give you the general gist of the story. The general gist of the story was that during World War I, when their friend from the yeshiva was drafted to the Russian army and sent to the front line, the Rebbe Rashab called on two of his friends, two bachim. One of them was Rabbi Eliezer, one was another one, which I don't remember his name. And he told them to go to the front lines. He told them which town to go to. And he said, go get back your friend, bring him back to yeshiva. Go get him back from the front lines. Okay, and that was their mission. How, what, where, that was also a mystery. There was one Chabad chassid who was able to help them on the way. And there was another one who lived close to the front lines in the town near the front line where they were supposed to find this boy, this bacher from their yeshiva that was drafted to the Russian army. But the mission was just go and get him. That was it. There was no real instructions. On the way, when they were at one of the stops, one of the Hasidim of the Rebbe Rashab did meet them at the train station and gave them food, gave them clothes. Basically, what they did is they dressed up as Russian soldiers, full garb, and they got onto the train that was taking soldiers to the front lines. That's how they slipped on a train. And when they slipped on at one of the train stations. So when they entered the train and the soldiers saw them, two new guys, and they said, "Where are you? How did you get here? You weren't here before." They said, "Oh, they kind of like missed which part of the train they were on, and they got into the wrong cabin, basically." So they kind of just slipped on and got onto they were Bachrim, they're the same age as the draft age, and they had evaded the draft somehow miraculously, but they got on the train dressed as Russian soldiers, and they went to the front lines to save their friend. And when they got to the front lines, then there was another chassid who lived in that town, like I said, and he let them sleep there, and he gave them some food, and he prayed for them. And basically, they did go under fire to the front line and search for him. This was complete faith. That's why I don't think he told the story too much, because you have to believe that they would actually go onto the front line, searching for him in the wilderness, and they were calling out his name, his Hebrew name, and they actually found him in a ditch. And they knew it would be a miracle if they found him. They knew it was the Rebbe's blessing. They were going on complete blind faith, and they actually did find their friend that was taken to the front line, and they took him out of the ditch, and they said, "Come with us," and he came with them, and they went back to this chassid's house who lived near the front line, and they fed him, and they gave him new clothes, and they got on regular clothes, and they were able, this chassid gave them money and gave them food and gave them everything. They were able to make it back to Lubavitch. So that's another story. Another story I'll tell you is from also World War I. This is before all this crazy, but there was around World War I, there was a typhus, I think, or after World War I, maybe. Okay, there's two stories I want to tell you. One was before and one was after. The one before I'll tell you first. This is a longer story, and there was typhus going around. A lot of people were dying. So I'm sorry. This is okay. I don't want to confuse the two stories. Okay. Yeah. So I'll tell you the short story first. The short story was there were a lot of Bachrim who were in the yeshiva of Lubavitch in 1917 approximately that were dying of typhus. A lot of them were getting sick. In those days, they basically had to be quarantined. There was nothing to be done to save people from that flu. And it was spreading like wildfire. And the Rebbe Rashab instructed Eliezer to take care of some of the Bachim who were sick. And what happened, on Shabbos, they needed food. And in those days, they needed to actually cook the food to make it for them. And the Rebbe Rashab told Rabbi Eliezer, also, this was, don't tell somebody else to go make the food for them. Don't hire, or don't instruct a non-Jew. It's a mitzvah for you to cook the food on Shabbos. You yourself should do it and take care of these bachim that are sick. So that was it was something that, this was a story that he also, if you can, whoever can mute yourself. It was just something that had a strong impact on him. How the Rebbe Rashab said, you yourself, it's a mitzvah. Don't go finding a non-Jew to go cook it for him. Right away, go and cook the food for them and give it to them on Shabbos. So for him, that was a big lesson. You give up yourself to save another Jew. Another story, which is a longer, very intricate, very beautiful story, was when the Rebbe Rashab told Eliezer to just leave yeshiva and go home. He sent him home. And in those days, the Bachrim weren't sent home unless they were thrown out of yeshiva. They never went home. It wasn't like the Bachrim could just go home and come back. They would stay in yeshiva until they got married for years. That's how it was. So Rabbi Eliezer was from Kherson, and they're learning in Lubavitch, and the Rebbe said to him, go back to Kherson, go home. And Rabbi Eliezer thought he was being thrown out of yeshiva, and he started to cry, and he was asking, for permission from the secretary to stand by the Rebbe Rashab's room and find out if he can speak to him and ask him why he's being sent home, which he did. And he was crying and crying, and the Rebbe Rashab said, you're not being sent away, you're not being thrown out of yeshiva. So Rabbi Eliezer said to him, but why am I being sent home then? And the Rebbe Rashab said, not everything we know we can say. So he's being sent home with no reason. So Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm being sent home, I'm going to be on trains now, and the Bolsheviks are throwing, I'll be all alone, and they're throwing people off the trains. They're throwing, especially Jews. If they see a Jew on a train, he heard rumors that they throw them off the train and they just let them die. They didn't respect human life, especially not a Jewish human life. And he said, I'm afraid. So the Rebbe Rashab said to him, I'm surprised at you. You're a Lubavitcher. You're a Bachar Tamchit Mimim. You know that God is everywhere and God is always with you. How can you say that you're all alone? God is with you. So that gave Rabbi Eliezer the strength, and he went on to go home. And actually, while he was on the train, there was a bunch of hooligans who wanted to throw him off the train. And there was a ruckus going on. Oh, we have a nice Jew, right? He's a bacher with payas. In those days, Lubavitchers had long payas. He was like on this train all alone. And he started getting really scared because they were talking about throwing him off the train. And they decided that they're going to wait till the train, instead of going upward where it's going slow, they're going to wait for the train to go downward where it will go faster. And then if they throw him off when the train is going down, he'll for sure die. If it's going slow, going upward, he may not die. So they were waiting, and he's shaking in his boots. And all of a sudden, an officer who was an injured officer with high ranks, lots of stars and everything, comes into the train and he says, what's going on over here? There was a commotion. And they said, oh, there's a Jew here, they're about to throw him off. And this officer, who was an injured officer, and he had high ranks, he said, I come from such and such a town. I don't remember the name of the town. And he said, near me, my neighbor on my street was a holy rabbi. And he named the name of the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, the name of the street. I don't remember. I could look it up at some point. And he said he was a holy man, and this person should not be thrown off the train. So because of his status and because of his injuries and because of he stopped them, and they didn't throw him off the train, and his life was spared. So that was, and Rabbi Eliezer, when he came home as a 17-year-old, as soon as he got home, he got sick with typhus. And then he understood why he was being sent home, because in those days, if you got typhus, nobody wanted to take care of you. They were quarantined on the outside of the city. And, so when he was quarantined and sent to the outskirts of the city, his father would come every day and bring him food and take care of him, make sure he was still alive. And he did survive the typhus, and he was able to, after over a year of recovery, able to come back to yeshiva. So that's another miracle story that happened to Rabbi Eliezer at the time through the Rebbe Rashab, whose Yortzeit Hilula is today. The Reb Shalom Dov of Lubavitch, the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, who is buried in Rostov. There is another miracle story I'll share with you about his burial site of the Rebbe Rashab. At a certain point after he was buried, the communists, the government decided to pave a road exactly where the cemetery was, and they were going to just, make a road covering the tombs, covering the tombstones. They didn't care. They covering the graves, the grave sites of the people who were buried there. So, of course, the Hasidim didn't like that idea that the Rebbe Shab's grave will be paved over by the government with a road. So also 10 Hasidim decided to go in the middle of the night and actually dig up the Rebbe's grave. And this is a known story. Rabbi Eliezer wasn't one of those 10, but he spoke to one of the Hasidim who was one of the 10 who dug up the grave and moved the Rebbe's body to a safer place where they weren't going to pave a road over it. And that Chassid, one of the Chassidim who was one of the grave diggers, who, by the way, was also risking their life to do that, told Rabbi Eliezer that he saw that the Rebbe Rashab's body was completely intact. So this is not first hand from Rabbi Eliezer, it's first hand from Rabbi Eliezer, who heard it from the person who dug it. But there are other people who heard it from the other 10 people who were there, that the Rebbe Rashab's body was completely intact when they moved him to his gravesite, his body into a new gravesite. So, another story. Okay, this also, one of the Hasidim who took over the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who was, our Rebbe's father-in-law, right? Rebbe Simchai Mashka's father. So he would conduct, at first in Lubavitch, he would conduct the, before the communists took over, he was a Rebbe for a short time before the communists took over, and he would do Farbrengens. Even once the communists took over, he was still making Farbrengens until he was arrested. So one of these Farbrengens, not just one, but many of these Farbrengens, Rabbi Eliezer was in charge of guarding. He was put in charge of guarding the Rebbe Rashab's empty chair, meaning his son, the previous Rebbe, was the Rebbe, and they still kept the Rebbe's chair, the previous, the Rebbe Rashab's chair next to him. Just like if you go to 770 now, you see the Lubavitch Rebbe's chair is still there in its place, untouched. So the same thing was done in Lubavitch 100 years ago. After the Rebbe Rashab passed away, his chair was still there at the Farbrengen next to his son, who was the Rebbe, and it was untouched. And it was Rabbi Eliezer Nanos was the one who was guarding the chair, protecting it from being pushed against by the Hasidim, the young yeshiva Bachar students who wanted to hear the Rebbe. There was no microphone, and they wanted to hear the previous Rebbe speaking, and they would push and crowd. And so he was appointed to guard the chair, that the Hasidim shouldn't push against the chair and lean on it. So there was one time of Farbrengen where there was a lot of pushing and a lot of, they crowding, and Rabbi Eliezer, who was pretty strong and pretty tall, had a hard time holding back the crowd, and they managed to push him against the chair, and he pushed against the chair. So the previous Rebbe turns to him in the chair, and he says, Eliezer, the Rebbe is here. Like, be careful, don't touch it. So this is a first-hand account from my teacher, Eliezer Nanos, who told me the story that the previous Rebbe told him, be careful, because the Rebbe is here, meaning his father is Da. His father, the Rebbe Shab, his soul is to hear. He was instructed not to be careful, not to touch his chair. So that, not to get pushed against the chair, basically. So that was another story that Rabbi Eliezer himself told me directly. And let me see, another story. just the what this is indirectly about the Rebbe Shab, who's Yotzedes today. One of the things that the Frierdiker Rebbe did before he left Russia, before he was expelled from Russia, after he was imprisoned for spreading Yiddishkeit and for keeping Yiddishkeit going in Russia, and he was being sent out of Russia, he went to first, before he left, to visit his father's gravesite, the Rebbe Shab, whose Hilula is today, in Rostov, to say goodbye to his, final time he would probably ever be able to go to the gravesite of his father. And when he got there, he did, like I told you at the beginning, he asked Rabbi Eliezer to collect like 10 Hasidim, 10 of the Lubavitcher Hasidim living in Rostov at the time, and have them come in for bringing with the previous Rebbe. So they come to the previous Rebbe, and they have a gathering. And at the gathering, the previous Rebbe asked these Hasidim to commit themselves to continuing the underground yeshiva system, which was illegal under communist regime, but they should keep it going, keep paying the teachers, keep making sure the system continued so Torah education wouldn't be eradicated from Russia during that time. And 10 of the Hasidim did promise that they would keep it no matter what until they would be taken to Siberia. And what I didn't mention was that they did have a system that if Hasidim were taken to Siberia and taken off their posts of the underground, if they were caught, they had somebody else who would replace them and continue the underground system even after they were taken. And you should just know, Rabbi Eliezer told me 99% of the people who were taken to Siberia never came back. And it was a very sad thing. So the fact that my teacher had a special bracha from the previous Rebbe that he would survive if he wasn't afraid was a very big deal to him. And he did survive, and he did make it out, and he did come to Israel. He had to spend another 11 years in Russia before he was taken out. Our Rebbe helped get him out of Russia during a time when people weren't coming out of Russia. And him and his wife were kind of had a VIP special underground. The Rebbe from behind the scenes managed to get them out of Russia, and he came to Eretz Yisrael, and the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael took care of him, and he lived there and was able. And then when he got after all these years of all this suffering, you know what was his mission? Our Rebbe gave him a mission, gave him a job. Okay, he was already older in age. And the Rebbe gave him a job, and the job was, as Rabbi Eliezer told me, was to teach girls who came from America to learn in Israel, and be there to be like their mashpia, their mentor, tell them stories, teach them Chassidus. So I had the good merit to be one of those girls who came from America to Israel, to Yerushalayim, to learn. My parents at the time lived in America. I came to learn in Israel, and I happened to know Hebrew and was able to learn with him because I'd been raised in Israel before. My parents had made Aliyah before, so I was really raised in Israel. I was able to come to him basically after school. When I was in high school, I would come to his home, and he would actually give me a soup, and he would teach me Chassidus. And the way I got to meet him, for those who don't know, is one of the Russian girls in my school, Taipke, she posted a little note on the bulletin board, and she said an older couple needs help for Pesach. Okay, so this is connected to, we're in the month of Nisan, we're getting ready for Pesach. So she said, an elderly couple needs help to get ready for Pesach, cleaning their house. And when I saw the bulletin board, I was like, okay, I can help them because my family was in America. I didn't have any responsibilities to clean for Pesach, so I volunteered, and I told her, and she took me to his home, and I met him and his Rebbitzin Rezel, and she said, she's willing to help for Pesach. So it was a very modest 2-bedroom apartment right across the yeshiva from Torah Emes and Shikun Chabad, a walking distance from our high school. And when I got there, Rabbi Eliezer first interviewed me, asked me a bunch of questions, who I am, where I'm from, who my parents are. I took notes. And then he said, before you can clean the house for Pesach, he said, you must learn some Chassidus. And of course, I was like a little girl. I'm not going to say no. I was a little intimidated. I didn't even know he was Sabota or anything. He didn't tell me until months later. But he said, you have to learn Chassidus first. Okay, so I was obedient. I sat there, and he opened up a mimer of the previous Rebbe, and he started teaching me. And that way, every time I came to help, he would sit and learn with me, and he would tell me stories. So I had the big zechut, the big merit of being one of his students. He has other students who are around the world who can tell you also even more stories. But and Binyamin Zilberstrom, who's one of the teachers in Torah Emes, one of the yeshiva teachers. He's a big rabbi and a very holy man. He was also took care of Rabbi Eliezer for many, many years. He was his neighbor. And he kind of, was this like, would come every day basically almost and check up on him, make sure he was okay, him and his wife. And he helped him with doctors and with, helpers and with, there was he really took him on as, I just got the benefits. I didn't really have to help him too much. I just got the benefits of getting to come and learn with him and hearing stories. And I'm here, I can share more with you at other times, but it's, I want to see if anybody has questions or comments. And I think Perla was one of the people who got to see him. Perla, did you ever get to meet Rabbi Eliezer when he came to California? Perla, I see you're on. You can unmute yourself if you want to tell us, because he did come to visit me in California like 3 times after I gave birth to my daughter Hani, after I gave birth in 1992 was the last time, I think. 1990, he came and he spoke for us a few times. 1990, he came, and 1980, when was it? 1988 approximately, he also came. He came 3 times to visit me. I think it was 1988, 1990, and 1992. And he was an old man. He didn't know English. And he came, the first 2 times he came by himself, just got on a plane and came to visit. And it was the bris of my, 1988 was the bris of my son, Eli, he came. Then 1990 was after the birth of my daughter, I believe in 1992. I could have checked the dates again, was he came to speak for my Beis Chana. I made a dinner, an opening grand dinner for Beis Chana of California that I just established, and he himself actually stopped by the Rebbe on the way and got verbal blessings and got nickels and coins and blessings from our Beis Chana that we here have now in California in his merit. So this is to be an aliyah for him, for Eliezer, and for the Rebbe Rashab, who was his teacher. I have one more story from Rabbi Eliezer. When he was 5 years old, his father took him to the Rebbe Rashab. But I first want to see if you have any questions. Anybody with questions? Yes, Toby, you can unmute yourself. Just go ahead.
Hi, Yehudi. Thank you for that. It was a pleasure to hear. And yes, I also had the merit of learning with Rev Nanos. I told you, yes. I told you, and yes. That was thanks to Yehudis Vishnevsky, God bless her.
Yes.
And, there was just reflecting on him, I'll never forget how, I was already in my mid-20s when I came to learn with him, but it was interesting. Like, he was an accountant, I think, by profession, right?
Yes.
And come Hanukkah time, he gave me Hanukkah gelt. I was like already a woman, but he gave me Hanukkah gelt. And there was always something about his precision about money. I think he was like very, I can't explain it. Like, it was not just like about dealing with money, but somehow like a righteousness that has to do with being medayek, if you understand what I'm saying, to be very careful, just to be careful with things altogether. And there was one story that he told me that is very central to his life story, as the Sabota in the prison, in the camps of Stalin. And that was that when he was taking his leave from the Rebbe Rashab, I think there was this, I always imagine it like this movie scene, and the Rebbe Rashab was leaving on a train. I think it was in Rostov.
It was the previous Rebbe who was on the train, leaving on the train.
It was before the Rebbe Rashab?
It was after the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab's son, the previous Rebbe.
Oh, the Friedeker Rebbe.
Friedeker Rebbe, yes.
Oh, I didn't, okay, thank you.
Yes.
And that the Friedeker Rebbe gave him the bracha that he told him that he would be taken
Yes.
prison, and that if he never showed submission to the authorities,
Yes.
that not only would he survive, but he would be zocha to come to
Yes.
Eretz Yisrael.
Yes.
So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yes. I told
And
that story at the beginning. Yes.
And I think other people should know that in my experience, he regarded you as a daughter, and he appreciated you so much, and just had endless hakaras hatov, and always spoke of how you also tried to, like, you wanted to care for him like a daughter would care for a father, and that you offered him a room, I believe, in your home. And like, I think he was always like, that was always in the back of his mind, that, you know, if things got really bad, I could go to you in Los Angeles.
Yes, yes.
He never said it in those words, but that was the impression that I had. He was very appreciative.
He was very tempted to come move to California and live with us.
Yeah.
In our home. Yeah. And my father's a doctor, so he felt, I guess, a little safer, because my father lived in LA at the time after I got married, and he would come visit when Rabbi Eliezer came to visit me. My father would come visit him and check up on him, and
oh, isn't that nice?
so he felt a little safer because of that. But I don't know why he never actually did it. He just talked about it, but never actually moved. It probably would have been very hard for him to move from Jerusalem to California in his 90s.
Yeah.
That would have been very hard. But yeah, he definitely, I would have loved to have had him. Thank God he lived to almost 100, full capacity, no memory loss, no mix up of the head. He had problems with his heart, but it was a miracle that the Rebbe did give him 20 more years. The Rebbe did say the 20 years that you were in Siberia don't count in your lifespan. So
Wow.
And in his 90s, he would go on the bus by himself. I mean, he came to, when he got on a plane when he was like 90 and came to visit me in San Diego, didn't know a word of English. And I was pregnant, I was about to give birth. He came for the birth, and I couldn't find him when I got to the airport. And there was this was before cell phones. I couldn't find him in the airport. I couldn't.
Gosh.
I ended up having to go back home after wandering with a big, 9-month pregnant with my 1-year-old. He was like 15 months, and I was carrying him around. I didn't have a stroller, and I was searching in the airport. Finally, I get back home after giving up and not knowing
if he was there.
If he was on the plane. He wasn't on the plane. I didn't know he was there. He had taken a cab by himself, just got on a cab, gave the driver.
Oh my gosh!
And made it to our house. Not speaking.
Thank God somebody was home for him.
Yeah, it was his first time in San Diego. It was his first time, I think. I don't know if, I mean, we're talking about, a long time ago. Anyway, so he was very strong-minded, fearless. And he cared for all his students. I mean, he said he would say my kapitel tehillim every day. And as he did for all his students who had been his students, he would pray for them every day, say their psalm. There were just many things that he just taught, also from just the way he behaved, but how he conducted his life. And he was always that same soldier. He said he could never get out of the mentality that he was in the gulag. He would always wake up.
He was still afraid.
What?
He was afraid. He was still afraid of the KGB.
Yeah.
When I was.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was.
If he brought up certain subjects, he would try to.
Yeah, but there was reason for it, because the KGB there were still people that could be harmed in Russia. So they were very careful. All the Hasidim, when they'd come out, they were very careful what information they would let out into the public, because they didn't want anybody who they had connections to in Russia to be arrested and convicted for information that they had divulged after they got out. So they were very, very careful. Actually, when I got him to speak in LA, he was very, very shocked, because I put Sabota on the flyer. He said the Rebbe had never allowed him to put the word Sabota on the flyer in those days. And this was 1990, and the Rebbe gave me a fax. I sent the flyer to the Rebbe's office, and I got a fax back for a blessing for the flyer, for the talk with Sabota. And he was completely shocked how that could have happened, because the Rebbe had never allowed it before. And I didn't know that the Rebbe hadn't allowed it. He never told that to me. I just made a flyer for my ladies. Sabota's here, He was totally baffled. It turns out, this was already in the 90s, and I guess the Rebbe changed his policy. In 1992, I made a dinner and I put the word sabota on it. And also he was like completely, this was more publicized. It wasn't just for my ladies. It was community-wide. I made an actual banquet in a hall with people from the extended community, men and women. And Rabbi Eliezer couldn't believe that I got a blessing. I got a fax in writing, and he couldn't believe he got a blessing, because he said people had offered him tons of money to come speak as sabota. And for many years, however, since he was, I think since it could have been decades, the Rebbe never gave him permission to speak. So in 1992, he did speak, and he did tell his story in public. And it was written up in the newspaper, and it was like, and then that it turned out that was already 1992. It was.
Was it recorded?
It was 90 or 92. I have to remember. What
was it recorded?
I don't think so. Maybe. You know what? I may have a video, an old, the old, not, yeah, the old film. Possibly. I had pictures. And I think it was either 1990 or 92. But anyway, after that, the communist regime fell completely. And it was, we realized it really was safe for him to speak at that point. There was no fear, but nobody knew that it was going to be safe, because it was before. It was a complete shock to everybody when the.
Oh, that's right. 91 was it 89 or 91? 89, I think, was when the Berlin Wall came down, and then was shortly after that.
So anyway, so when things got better, he was still afraid that there would be a coup and things would go back to the way they were. He never really trusted. It took a while for him to accept that there was absolutely no way that they were going back to communism. So that was, and that there would be no trouble from the KGB for the people in Russia. So that was another story. Anybody have questions? You're also welcome to ask, because I gave over a lot of facts without giving too much details. So I'm telling you from memory. But if somebody wants to ask something, you could. Perla, I'm really curious. I can't remember if you saw. I'm pretty sure you saw Rabbi Eliezer. Oh yeah, Perla must have seen Rabbi Eliezer. Perla, I see you're on. If you're listening, because Rabbi Eliezer came to San Diego. Perla lived in San Diego at that time. And she may have seen him, because he came from my son's bris, my son Ellie's bris. That was 34 years ago. 34 years ago. Can you believe it?
I want to say thank you for sharing these stories. They're so inspiring, and I love that you took the time to share with us, and also your personal experiences. It's amazing to me, like, that all this has happened in this amount of time. I know when we talk about it and we say like, oh, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, but when you really think about it, like, we've made so much progress in just those short. All this, I mean, from when it started, like the First World War, the Second World War, and then now it's like, it's so incredible. Like, you can tell Hashem is with us, like how Hashem has been shining his light and guiding us, and like slowly, like bringing us to like Moshiach. You can see it right here, how quickly it's happening. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes. I was very fortunate to be raised with people who had experienced a lot of miracles in their life and be told these stories. I mean, each story that I told you now, he told me it took an hour or so or more to tell the story with all the details and all the drama and all the buildup. I'm not doing it justice. I'm just, at some point, maybe I'll tell us. But I did have to have patience to sit there. But it was amazing to sit through it and hear it. But he spoke slowly, and he's an old man, so it was worth it though. And some of the stories he told me a few times, because as older people, they say a story over and over. So it was definitely intriguing and a history. And we see that I was blessed to be raised with people who had experienced miracles and lived through it and believed, had strong faith in their Rebbe and followed their instructions and put their life on the line. I just felt very privileged to be able to meet such people and hear from such people and experience, life with these kind of people. And the fact that he wasn't famous was because he, like I said, he kept a low profile because of the people he was in touch with, or he had been in touch with in Russia. And they didn't, there were still many Hasidim who were trapped in Russia, couldn't get out until the 90s. So, which, by the way, I'll tell you one more quick story. It doesn't really have to do with, it has to do with the fact that our Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, when I was also a young teenager, I remember going to hear the Rebbe give live broadcasts. In those days, it was, we didn't have TV sets. We would hear it on just audio. And it wasn't in every home like you have now on, on the internet. We'd have to go to the yeshiva, where there was a broadcast for anybody in Jerusalem could come to that center in Jerusalem, at the yeshiva. In a different town, in Kfar Chabad, they had another broadcast in Kfar Chabad, and that's how they had it all over the world. You had to come to the hookup, basically. So I remember I went to this hookup, and my girlfriends from my class are also there, and I remember my friends would have to translate because it was in Yiddish. I didn't know Yiddish. So one of my friends, I asked her to translate, what did the Rebbe say? And she said, the Rebbe said, and this was like around 1990, the Rebbe said, maybe it was 89, the Rebbe said that Hasidim should build apartments and homes for the Jews in Russia, because the Jews in Russia are about to come out and they're going to come to Israel and they're going to need.
I heard him say that.
You also heard him say it?
I was there in Crown Heights.
You're in Crown Heights. I heard it.
I heard Rebbe saying it, and I said, this is wild. And it was Nevuah. I heard Nevuah. It was like,
it was a prophecy. It was definitely a prophecy. And I remember I was just beginning to, study in a Chabad school at that point. I hadn't been exposed to Chabad or to the Rebbe. And I was like, I remember thinking to myself, I wonder who's going to be this crazy chassid who's going to get up and go build apartments based on the fact that the Rebbe said that they're coming out, when there's no indication whatsoever in any current events that there's any opening. It's been 70 years since the border's been closed and there's nobody allowed out. Maybe a few individuals who were exchanged and bartered with the KGB, like Rabbi Eliezer was. He was an exchange, I think. So it just seemed impossible. I said, who's going to be that chassid who believes so much in the Rebbe that he's going to actually go build apartments, put himself on the line like that to do it? And it turned out there was one. I think it was Kogan. Rabbi Kogan, I think was him. And he went and built 1,000 apartments in Gilo. He established the community of Gilo, which is right at the outskirts, right, of Jerusalem on the way, And lo and behold, shortly after, the Russian Jews started pouring into Israel. The 1,000 apartments were completely filled immediately, and there was a shortage of places for the Jews to stay. So that was, they were scrambling for places for them. So
89, what year was that?
Probably 89, but I don't remember. I didn't keep 100% track. We could look it up by the teachings. But I just remember being odd that somebody actually did follow the instructions of the Rebbe under such, because the Rebbe didn't necessarily, I don't think he appointed anybody. He offered the opportunity for a chassid who's willing to believe in the cause. A lot of times, you should know, afterwards I realized the Rebbe didn't necessarily, most of the time, didn't necessarily instruct the chassid, you have to go here or you have to go there. He allowed chassidim to choose if they wanted to be shluchim, if they wanted to start something, if they wanted to do a project. And then the Rebbe would give them a blessing if they initiated it. That was most of the time. The Rebbe didn't force or impose a shlichus. Somebody had to actually, and it occurred to me afterwards when I suggested to the Rebbe that I would start Beis Chana here in California, it was my idea. It was, based on the fact that I wanted to learn with women. And I asked the Rebbe for permission to establish the Beis Chana here. So that was, and then the Rebbe gave me faxes and brachas. So that afterwards it just occurred to me, the Rebbe didn't initiate it, I initiated it, and then the Rebbe gave his blessing. So that was, that was the common thing. I didn't even realize that at the time, that how fortunate I was that I thought of it and it came to me. And I remember when I was 17, also Rabbi Eliezer would tell me, you are my students, so you're going to do shlichus. You're going to be an emissary of the Rebbe. He said, I have, my students are all over the world, and you're going to be one. I remember thinking, he's dreaming. I'm 17 years old. I'm not going to be a shlicha of the Rebbe. I'm not on that level. But he believed in me. He told me, basically he says, what he was telling me, I'm investing in you. I'm giving you my time. I'm teaching you. I'm telling you stories. And I expect you to take it on and carry it on later on in life. So that was also something that gave me a lot of strength to realize when I did come to California, that I do have something that other women didn't get, because I did grow up in Yerushalayim, in the holy city of Jerusalem. I grew up with Hasidim. I grew up with good teachers. I got an education there. I learned in the Chabad institutions basically, and then for 5 years, because even after I got married, I finished my schooling and I got a teacher's degree there, and all in the Chabad system. So I realized that I was blessed and I was fortunate, more than most average people did. And also the Rebbe sent us on shlichus in 1986, giving over my age, to SDSU, San Diego State University, to do campus work. So I was a young girl. I was 20 years old and married with a kid already. And I was sent to be like an emissary for the students, college students who were my age or older than me. So yeah, I just actually this past week, a few days ago, I met up, Perla, you'll be happy, Shoshana Shechtman, Dr. Shechtman. She was one of the professors at SDSU. She was Israeli. She is Israeli, and she saw me at the Chabad house, me and my little boychikel, my little baby, my husband. She said, Yehudit, I want you to teach me Chassidus. And she knew what Chassidus was, I guess, because she was Israeli. And she decided I'm going to be her teacher. And I remember thinking, I'm 20 years old and I'm going to teach this professor who had, 10 years in SDSU. And she said, not only are you going to teach me, you're going to teach Perla. And Perla's on right now. I see Perla Kimball. Perla was a real estate agent and she was an attorney. And I was like, I'm going to teach this attorney and this professor. But they insisted, and we got together once a week and we learned Chassidus. So that was a long time ago. And I just met Shoshana Shechtman, came to town. She wanted to meet with me. We met for a few minutes and reconnected. And thank God, it's all the Rebbe's blessings. Hi, Perla, there you are. Yeah, I got to see Shoshana this week, Dr. Shechtman. And in her merit, we learned together. We learned Chassidus together. So Perla Bas Kelesh, have a good refuah shleima, and all of you should be blessed. I see it's already an hour, and the Rebbe Shab, we're very, very blessed. All the energy that we got from the Rebbe Shab and from Rabbi Eliezer and from the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, we should all take with us to really experience miracles in our lives and bring miracles down. Miracles, the Rebbe says, we experience through overcoming, going beyond what's normal for us, and making miracles in our life the normal. So bringing experiences of beyond what we think is we're not capable of doing, and bringing it into our life and making it normal. That's miracles in our times. These are the kinds of miracles that are going to bring an everlasting geula. The miracles, the Rebbe says, we're not supposed to wait for them to come from heaven. That happened in the times of Egypt. That happened in 1991. Those are wonderful miracles, but they don't have a strongest an effect as miracles that we draw down through overcoming our own inner obstacles. That's what the Rebbe said in 5751 through 5752. The Rebbe said we have to initiate miracles, and by living in a miraculous way in our own life, those kinds of miracles are everlasting miracles that will actually bring geula to ourselves and to the world in a way that will be everlasting because we made them happen. They weren't just bestowed upon us from above. So good luck with it. It should be miraculous this month because see miracles in our life and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very
much. Kosher and happy Pesach. And I plan to do next week. We might do next week. Hopefully we'll be at 11. We might change the time. So let's keep posted because we might do an actual live event next week, but we'll see. In the meantime, I'm still keeping it at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And it's because it's going to be the Lubavitch Rebbe's 120th birthday is on next week, not this coming week, a week from Tuesday. So on next Sunday, we might do a special learning and get together in honor of the Rebbe's 120th birthday. So I'll stay posted. Take
Thank
care all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Toby, for sharing. I appreciate it. Take care. Take care, Dvorla. Thank you for helping with the hookup and the Facebook Live and the Herzl, Rabbi Herzl Para Facebook Live. Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Be well.